Mona Lisa stepped into the bustling airport terminal, her heels clicking assertively against the polished floor. The vibrant atmosphere of travelers rushing to and fro filled her with a sense of purpose. At 32, she stood tall as the CEO of Apex Airlines, a position she had fought hard to attain in a male-dominated industry. Her sleek black dress hugged her curves, and her natural hair framed her face, exuding confidence. Yet, beneath her poised exterior lay the weight of countless struggles and triumphs that had shaped her journey. As she navigated through the throng of passengers, Mona Lisa caught snippets of conversations around her. Most were mundane, discussions about vacation plans, work trips, and family reunions. But one particular exchange pricked her ears. A group of travelers nearby spoke in hushed tones, casting furtive glances in her direction. "Can you believe she's the CEO? I mean, look at her," one woman scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "Right? She doesn't fit the mold for first class," another added, her tone laced with thinly veiled judgment. Mona Lisa's heart sank as she overheard the remarks. She had grown accustomed to the whispers, the sideways glances, but it still stung. It was disheartening to realize that her appearance, something she cherished, could provoke such narrow-mindedness. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of the countless battles she had fought to rise above the prejudices that surrounded her. "Excuse me," she said, turning to face the group, her voice steady. "I'd appreciate a little more respect in this space. We all have a right to be here." The group fell silent, their expressions shifting from surprise to indignation. Mona Lisa walked away, her heart racing but her spirit unyielded. She had no time to dwell on their ignorance. She was on her way to board her own flight, a symbol of her accomplishments and resilience. As she approached the boarding gate, Mona Lisa felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. The moment she stepped onto the plane, she was met with skeptical glances from the passengers seated in first class. The air was thick with unspoken judgments, and she could sense the undercurrent of disbelief that rippled through the cabin. The flight attendant, Karen, stood at the entrance, her perfectly coiffed hair and crisp uniform a stark contrast to the dismissive roll of her eyes as she handed Mona Lisa her boarding pass. "Here you go," Karen said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Welcome aboard." Mona Lisa forced a smile, refusing to let Karen's disdain penetrate her composure. "Thank you," she replied, her voice calm. She made her way down the aisle, the weight of the passengers' gazes heavy on her shoulders. They seemed to scrutinize every step she took, every breath she made. She settled into her seat, the luxurious fabric of first class a small comfort against the rising tide of discomfort. Next to her sat a businessman engrossed in his laptop, seemingly indifferent to her presence. Mona Lisa couldn't help but wonder what thoughts were running through his mind. Did he see her as an equal or merely as an anomaly? As the plane began to taxi down the runway, Mona Lisa felt a familiar pang of loneliness. She had forged her path in a world that often refused to acknowledge her worth. The whispers and glances from earlier lingered in her mind, and she couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider in her own domain. "Just a few more hours," she whispered to herself, clenching her fists in her lap. She was determined to rise above the prejudice, to turn the tide of judgment into respect. Mona Lisa closed her eyes and envisioned herself as a force of change, a beacon of strength in a world that often felt unwelcoming. As the plane lifted off the ground, she took a deep breath, knowing that the journey ahead would test her resilience in ways she had yet to imagine. Mid-flight, the atmosphere inside the cabin was charged with tension. Mona Lisa sat upright in her plush first-class seat, her heart pounding beneath her tailored blazer. She could feel the weight of the stares from the other passengers, their whispered comments piercing through the dull roar of the engines. Just then, Mr. Thompson, a middle-aged man in a crisp suit, unleashed his discontent. "Excuse me," he bellowed, his voice slicing through the hum of conversation. "This is first class. Why on earth is she sitting up here?" He gestured dramatically toward Mona Lisa, his face flushed with indignation. "There are plenty of seats in coach for someone like her." A hush fell over the cabin, and Mona Lisa's stomach twisted in knots. She felt the heat rising in her cheeks, anger bubbling just beneath the surface. She took a deep breath, her thoughts racing. Who did he think he was? Sir, with all due respect, Mona Lisa replied, her voice steady yet firm. I paid for my seat, just like everyone else. I have every right to be here. Mr. Thompson scoffed, crossing his arms defiantly. You may have your ticket, but this isn't a charity flight. We don't need to lower our standards. Mona Lisa's heart raced as she sensed the eyes of the passengers shifting between them. Some seemed to agree with Mr. Thompson, their expressions a mix of confusion and disdain. Others appeared uncomfortable, unsure whether to intervene. Excuse me, but that's completely inappropriate. A woman from the back of the cabin chimed in, her voice wavering yet courageous. Everyone deserves respect, regardless of their appearance. Yeah, another voice chimed in, emboldened by the first. It's 2023. Get with the times, man. Mr. Thompson's face turned a vivid shade of red, and he shifted uncomfortably. But instead of backing down, he pressed on. I just think that it's wrong for someone like her to take a seat in first class. It's a privilege. Mona Lisa clenched her jaw, the hurt rising like bile in her throat. What do you mean by someone like me? She demanded, her voice rising slightly. Do you think my hard work and achievements mean nothing because of how I look? The divide in the cabin deepened. Some passengers nodded in agreement with Mona Lisa, while others remained silent, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and discomfort. Derek, the businessman seated beside her, shifted in his seat, his eyes darting between Mona Lisa and Mr. Thompson, seemingly weighing his options. Look, Derek finally said, surprising everyone, I don't know Mona Lisa, but I do know that we should celebrate diversity, not criticize it. This is a place for all of us, not just for select individuals. The tension in the cabin shifted, and Mona Lisa caught Derek's eye for a brief moment. He was standing up for her, and she felt a spark of gratitude mixed with confusion. Why was he taking a stand? They hadn't even exchanged names. Thank you, Mona Lisa said softly to Derek, her voice barely audible amidst the rising chorus of support from other passengers. It's ridiculous, Derek continued, his tone growing more passionate. We're all here for the same reason, to fly to our destination. Why should any of us be made to feel unwelcome? Mr. Thompson's face contorted with frustration, but his arguments seemed to lose steam as more voices joined the chorus. The cabin filled with murmurs of agreement, and Mona Lisa felt her heart swell with a mix of defiance and relief. She was no longer alone in this battle. As the argument continued, Mona Lisa's thoughts wandered momentarily to her journey. The sleepless nights, the sacrifices, and the relentless climb to the top in a field dominated by men who often didn't look like her. She had fought too hard to let someone like Mr. Thompson undermine her place in this world. Let's all remember, Mona Lisa interjected, her voice rising above the din, that we are all human beings deserving of respect. I am proud of who I am and what I have achieved. I won't let anyone take that away from me. The cabin fell silent, the weight of her words lingering in the air. Mona Lisa felt a surge of empowerment, her spine straightening as she held her head high. She could feel Derek's gaze on her, a flicker of admiration mixed with something deeper. In that moment, amidst the chaos, Mona Lisa realized that love and respect might just be found in the most unexpected of places. She could feel the shift in the atmosphere, a fragile connection beginning to form, and it filled her with a sense of hope she hadn't anticipated. The atmosphere in the cabin felt heavy after the confrontation, the echoes of Mr. Thompson's bigotry still lingering in the air. Mona Lisa sat stiffly in her seat, her heart racing, but her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. She clenched her fists, trying to suppress the urge to let the hurt seep through. Just then, Derek turned to her, his expression a mixture of concern and admiration. Hey, he said softly, I'm really sorry you had to go through that. It was completely out of line. Mona Lisa met his gaze, surprised by the sincerity in his eyes. Thank you. It's just exhausting. You think you're past it, and then it hits you like a ton of bricks. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I never thought I'd have to defend my place on my own flight. Derek nodded, his brow furrowed. I can't even imagine. I mean, I've had my own struggles, but nothing quite like that. He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I'm Derek, by the way. Derek Hayes." He extended his hand, a warm smile breaking through the tension. "Mona Lisa Johnson," she replied, shaking his hand. "Nice to meet you, Derek." As they settled into a more comfortable conversation, the flight crew worked diligently to calm the remaining turbulence in the cabin. Derek leaned closer, genuinely interested. "So, what's your story? How did you end up here, running an airline?" Mona Lisa chuckled lightly, the warmth of his curiosity easing some of her tension. "It's a long one, but I'll try to keep it short. I grew up in a small town, and I was always fascinated by planes and travel. I remember watching them fly overhead and dreaming of the day I'd be on one of those flights, not just as a passenger but as someone in control." She paused, letting the memories wash over her. "I faced a lot of obstacles, especially as a black woman in a predominantly white industry. There were times I wanted to give up, but I kept pushing myself. Now, here I am." Derek listened intently, a newfound respect forming in his eyes. "That's incredible. You're really inspiring, you know? It takes a lot of courage to break barriers like that." A blush crept onto Mona Lisa's cheeks. "Thank you, Derek. It hasn't been easy, but I believe in creating opportunities for others. Representation matters, especially in leadership roles." Derek nodded vigorously. "Absolutely. I'm an artist, and I often feel overlooked in the industry too. It's tough to get recognition when people assume you don't belong." Mona Lisa tilted her head, intrigued. "What kind of art do you create?" "I'm a painter," he replied, a spark igniting in his eyes. "I focus on urban landscapes, capturing the essence of life in the city. But it's hard to make a living, you know? Sometimes I feel like I'm screaming into a void, hoping someone will notice." Mona Lisa could relate. She had spent countless nights working late, pouring her heart into her business, hoping to prove herself in a world that often overlooked her. "I understand that feeling all too well," she said, "but you have to keep pushing. Your voice matters, and so does your art." Just as a sense of camaraderie began to form between them, Karen, the flight attendant, swept by with a haughty air. She paused, overhearing their conversation. With a smirk, she interjected, "Well, isn't this cute? A struggling artist bonding with the CEO of a failing airline." Her tone dripped with condescension, and Mona Lisa's heart sank as she felt the tension return. "Excuse me?" Mona Lisa said, her voice steady but laced with indignation. "What's your problem?" Karen crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "Nothing, just wondering how someone like you thinks they can fit into a world like this. You're not really one of us, are you?" She raised an eyebrow, a smug smile tugging at her lips. Derek's expression hardened, and he quickly interjected, "What's wrong with you? Mona Lisa is more than qualified to be here. You should be ashamed of yourself." Karen scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Please, spare me the lecture from a wannabe artist. You're both just living in a fantasy." Mona Lisa's heart raced with a mix of anger and disappointment. She had hoped for a moment of connection, a shared understanding, but the reality of prejudice crashed back down around her. She took a deep breath, refusing to let Karen's venomous words shatter her resolve. "You don't know me, and you certainly don't know what I've accomplished. I'm proud of who I am and what I've built, despite people like you." Derek nodded in agreement, his eyes locked onto Karen's, unwavering. "Yeah, you should really take a lesson in respect. It's 2023. We're past this kind of thinking." Karen's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "Whatever helps you sleep at night," she retorted, moving away with an air of dismissal. Feeling the weight of the encounter, Mona Lisa turned back to Derek, her heart still racing. "Thank you for standing up for me," she said, her voice softer now. "It's refreshing to find someone who gets it." Derek smiled, albeit cautiously. "We've got to watch each other's backs, right? Especially in a world that seems determined to tear us down." Mona Lisa felt a flicker of hope amidst the turmoil, a silent agreement forming between them. In that moment, she realized that, together, they might be able to face the challenges ahead, both on the flight and beyond. As the flight continued its journey, the cabin was suddenly jolted by turbulence, causing gasps and murmurs of panic to ripple through the passengers. Mona Lisa, seated in first class, felt the plane dip and sway, but her instincts kicked in immediately. She rose from her seat, her heart pounding not from fear, but from the urge to take charge. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm," she announced, her voice steady yet authoritative. "We are experiencing some turbulence, but our crew is trained to handle this. Please fasten your seatbelts and remain seated." Her presence commanded attention, and the eyes of the passengers shifted towards her. Derek, sitting a few rows back, watched with admiration as Mona Lisa's confidence transformed the atmosphere. She moved gracefully down the aisle, reassuring those who appeared particularly anxious. "Excuse me, ma'am," an elderly woman said, her hands trembling. "I've never liked flying. Is everything going to be all right?" Mona Lisa knelt beside her, maintaining eye contact. "Absolutely. Turbulence is a normal part of flying, and it usually passes quickly. Just breathe with me, okay?" She demonstrated a deep inhalation, and the woman followed suit, visibly calming. As the turbulence persisted, Mona Lisa continued to circulate through the cabin, offering words of encouragement. "You're all doing great. Just a little bumpy ride, that's all." The passengers began to relax, and the once palpable tension in the air transformed into a collective sense of resilience. After several minutes that felt like an eternity, the plane steadied, and the captain's voice crackled through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've passed through the turbulence. Thank you for your patience." A wave of relief washed over the cabin, and the passengers erupted into applause, led by Derek, who stood and clapped enthusiastically. Mona Lisa beamed, her heart swelling with pride as she basked in their appreciation. "Thank you, everyone. I'll pass this along to the crew," she said, her voice warm and genuine. But amidst the applause, she noticed Karen, the flight attendant, standing with her arms crossed, a scowl etched on her face. Mona Lisa felt a shiver of unease. Karen's disdain only seemed to grow with each moment. As the flight resumed its course, Mona Lisa settled back into her seat, her adrenaline still pumping. Derek approached her, a wide grin lighting up his features. "That was incredible. You handled that like a pro." "Thank you," Mona Lisa replied, a hint of modesty in her tone. "I just did what needed to be done." I could see the fear melting away as you spoke. "You have this gift for connecting with people," Derek said, his eyes shining with admiration. "I'm not sure I could have done that." Mona Lisa chuckled softly, the tension from earlier fading away. "You'd be surprised at what you can do when you have to. I just didn't want anyone to panic." "Still, it's impressive," Derek insisted. "You could lead an army with that kind of charisma." As they exchanged stories, the atmosphere between them shifted, an unspoken bond forming amidst their shared experiences. Mona Lisa spoke about her journey in the airline industry, the hurdles she faced, and her commitment to breaking barriers. Just then, Karen approached them, her demeanor icy. "Excuse me, Mona Lisa," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I just wanted to remind you that this is not a leadership seminar. We're here to fly, not to perform." Mona Lisa's heart sank, but she kept her composure. "I was merely trying to ensure the safety and comfort of our passengers, Karen. Isn't that what we're all here for?" "Of course," Karen retorted, her eyes narrowing, "but it's not your place to take charge. You're just a passenger like everyone else. Let the professionals do their job." Derek shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension brewing between the two women. "Actually, Mona Lisa just demonstrated remarkable leadership," he interjected, stepping in to support her. "People were scared, and she helped them. That's a skill, not a position." Karen's expression hardened, and she turned on him, her voice brimming with disdain. "And what would you know about it? You're just a—" "Enough." Mona Lisa's voice rang out, firm and resolute. "We all have our roles here, and I think it's time to focus on the passengers rather than undermining each other." The cabin was silent, the atmosphere thick with tension. Mona Lisa felt the weight of Karen's gaze, a challenge hidden beneath it. She knew she had to remain strong, not just for herself but for everyone watching. As the flight continued, Mona Lisa steeled herself for the challenges that lay ahead, aware that her confrontation with Karen was only just beginning. The rumblings of discontent were not over, but with Derek's support, she felt emboldened to face whatever came next. Mona Lisa's heart raced as she approached Karen, the flight attendant whose disdain had been palpable throughout the flight. The cabin still buzzed with the remnants of the earlier confrontation, and Mona Lisa could feel the eyes of the passengers on her as she steeled herself. Taking a breath, she called out, "Karen, can we talk for a moment?" Karen looked up, her expression a blend of amusement and contempt. "Oh, is someone feeling brave?" she retorted, folding her arms across her chest in a gesture of superiority. "What's there to talk about? You know you don't belong here, right?" Mona Lisa's pulse quickened at the blatant prejudice. She refused to let Karen's smirk deflate her resolve. "I earn my place here, Karen. Not just on this flight, but in this industry. Your behavior is unacceptable." "Earned?" Karen laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. "You think you can just waltz in here with your whatever that is," she gestured dismissively at Mona Lisa's stylish attire, "and claim you belong? This is first class, not a charity." "Excuse me?" Mona Lisa stepped closer, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling within her. "I'm the CEO of this airline. I think I know a thing or two about belonging." The cabin fell silent, the weight of the revelation settling over the passengers like a thick fog. Derek, who had been observing from his seat, felt a surge of anger at Karen's blatant racism. He stood up, his voice loud enough to command attention. "You heard her, Karen. This is ridiculous. She's not just here because she wants to flaunt something. She's here because she built this airline from the ground up." Karen's expression twisted into one of disbelief, her eyes narrowing as she attempted to dismiss Derek's words. "Oh please, like that matters. Just because she's some token CEO doesn't mean she represents us." "Token?" Derek's voice rose, fueled by the support brewing among the other passengers. "She represents strength, resilience, and hard work. Something you clearly wouldn't understand. Prejudice has no place here. Who do you think you are?" Karen shot back, her bravado cracking slightly as she faced the collective gaze of the passengers, who were beginning to murmur in agreement with Derek. "I'm someone who believes in equality," Derek stated firmly, his eyes burning with intensity. "And I'm not going to sit quietly while someone like you spews hate." Mona Lisa felt a rush of gratitude for Derek. Here was this man, a stranger until moments ago, standing up for her in a way she hadn't expected. "Thank you, Derek," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "But this isn't just about me." "No, it's not," Derek replied, his gaze still fixed on Karen. "It's about all of us. We can't let people like you dictate who belongs where. We should be lifting each other up, not tearing each other down." The atmosphere in the cabin shifted, the passengers now rallying behind Mona Lisa and Derek. A woman spoke up from the back. "I'm with you. This is unacceptable. We need more leaders like her." "Exactly," another passenger chimed in. "It's about time we stand against this kind of behavior." Karen's bravado began to crumble as the tide turned against her. She shifted uncomfortably, glancing around as murmurs of support for Mona Lisa grew louder. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, backing away, her authority evaporating in the face of their unity. With the confrontation simmering down, Mona Lisa felt a wave of empowerment wash over her, a stark contrast to the humiliation she had experienced earlier. She met Derek's gaze and smiled, a genuine smile that sparked a flicker of hope in her heart. "Thank you for standing up for me," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. Derek shrugged, a small smile breaking across his face. "It's the least I could do. You deserve to be respected, just like anyone else." As the plane began its descent, Mona Lisa took a deep breath, her mind swirling with thoughts of her journey, the prejudices she had faced, and the unexpected allies she had found. She felt exhausted but invigorated, ready to confront whatever came next. As they landed, she knew this wouldn't be the last time she'd have to fight for her place in the world, but she also felt a newfound strength within her. Stepping off the plane, Mona Lisa walked through the terminal, her head held high. She overheard snippets of conversation, passengers discussing her leadership during the turbulence, praising her composure. Their words ignited a spark of hope within her, a reminder that change was possible and that she was not alone in her fight. As Mona Lisa stepped into the airport lounge, a sense of purpose washed over her. She had just endured a flight filled with prejudice and humiliation, but now she was determined to turn that experience into a catalyst for change. The atmosphere buzzed with activity, travelers mingling, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. However, her focus was drawn to a small area roped off for interviews. A news crew was waiting, their cameras ready to capture her story. "Mona Lisa, over here," a reporter called, waving her over. The bright lights shone down, and she felt a surge of adrenaline. This was her moment to speak out, to confront the biases she had faced not just today, but throughout her career. Taking a deep breath, she walked toward the crew, her heart pounding. As she approached, the lead reporter, a middle-aged woman with short, curly hair, smiled encouragingly. "Thank you for joining us, Mona Lisa. We heard about the incident on your flight. Can you share your thoughts?" "Absolutely," Mona Lisa began, her voice steady and strong. "What happened on that flight is not an isolated incident. It's a reflection of the systemic prejudice that still exists in our society. As a Black woman in the airline industry, I've faced my share of challenges, and today was just another reminder of how far we still have to go." The reporter nodded, her expression serious. "What would you like to tell those who witnessed your experience?" Mona Lisa's gaze swept across the lounge, landing on Derek, who stood a few feet away, watching with admiration. "To anyone who witnessed what happened, I want to say thank you for standing with me. It's essential that we confront prejudice head-on and advocate for diversity and inclusion in every industry. We can't allow ignorance to dictate our worth." As she spoke, she saw the support in Derek's eyes, and it fueled her passion. "Representation matters," she continued. "It's crucial that we see people of all backgrounds and positions of power. I've worked tirelessly to build Apex Airlines, not just to succeed, but to inspire others who look like me to dream big and reach for the skies." The reporter's eyes lit up. "That's a powerful message. How do you feel about the support you received today?" "It was overwhelming," Mona Lisa replied, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I felt alone at first, but then I realized that standing up for myself invited others to join the fight against discrimination. We need to lift each other up and create a community that embraces diversity." The interview concluded with the reporter thanking her for her time, and Mona Lisa stepped away, feeling lighter and more empowered than ever. As she scanned the lounge, she caught Derek's eye again. He approached her with a broad smile. "You were incredible," he said, his voice warm and genuine. "I was moved by your courage." "Thank you, Derek," she replied, her heart racing. "It felt good to share my story." In that moment, something shifted between them, an unspoken connection deepening. Before she could think too much about it, Derek took a step closer. "I've been inspired by your strength, and I'd love to take you out sometime, a real date if you're interested." Mona Lisa blinked in surprise, her cheeks flushing. "I'd like that," she said, a smile breaking across her face. "I didn't expect this today." "Neither did I," he chuckled softly, running a hand through his hair. "But sometimes the best things come unexpectedly." As they exchanged numbers, the lounge began to buzz with conversations about Mona Lisa's powerful words. People approached her with compliments and support, and she felt a sense of community enveloping her. It was a stark contrast to the isolation she had felt earlier. Suddenly, a commotion broke out near the entrance. Mona Lisa turned to see a group of airline officials approaching, their expressions serious. One of them, a tall man in a crisp suit, stepped forward and cleared his throat. "Mona Lisa, we need to speak with you. We've received reports regarding the incident on your flight, particularly concerning the behavior of one of our crew members." Mona Lisa's heart raced as she exchanged glances with Derek, who nodded in encouragement. "I'm here," she said firmly. "We are taking this matter very seriously," the man continued. "Karen will be facing consequences for her actions. We want to ensure that such behavior is not tolerated in our airline." Relief washed over Mona Lisa as she realized that her voice had not only been heard but had also sparked a change. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. "I appreciate that." As the officials discussed the next steps, Mona Lisa felt a wave of hope wash over her. She had faced prejudice, But she had also found a way to turn that negativity into a powerful message of resilience. And now, standing beside Derek, she felt a promise of love and partnership blossom amidst the challenges ahead.